Hello. I'd like to say hello to all of my friends in Catalonia and across Spain from the business community who are here today for this very exciting conference. I'm going to start on a somber note if I can this afternoon. I hope it'll end up being a liberating reflection, but you will have to judge. GDP is slowing all over the world in every region. And the reason is productivity has been declining all over the world for the last 10 years. The result is unemployment's very high, and especially for the millennial generation trying to find their place in this 21st century workforce. Our economists are projecting 20 more years of low productivity growth. And let me do the numbers. After two industrial revolutions in the 19th and 20th century, here's where we stand this afternoon. Arguably, 50% of the human race, all of us, are doing quite well, much better than our ancestors did before we began the industrial age. On the other hand, 40% of the human race, making $2 a day or less, are not significantly better off today than their ancestors were 200 years ago. And I'd have to say that 1 billion people making $1 a day on this world today are probably worse off than their ancestors. So while half the human race is doing better, much better, the other half of the human race only marginally better, the very wealthy have done very well. This afternoon, in this conference, we should think about this. The 8 richest people in the world today, the 8 richest people alive today, their combined wealth now equals the accumulated wealth of 1/2 the human population living on this earth. That's 3.5 billion people. There's something very wrong with the way we're organizing our economic life here on earth. And now it's clear that we are in a long-term economic crisis, but now this economic system we're in has given rise to a much more profound crisis. After 2 centuries, 2 industrial revolutions, we've spewed massive amounts of fossil fuels into the atmosphere of this planet, and we now are in real-time climate change. What's terrifying about climate change, and this is never described, because what I'm about to describe, if everyone in the world heard what I'm about to say, they'd be justifiably terrified, motivated, and on page over the next 3 generations to commit themselves to addressing this turning point. Climate change changes the water cycles of the earth. That's what this is all about. We are the watery planet. Our ecosystems have developed over millions of years based on the precipitation, the hydrological cycles, the cloud cycles that cover our ecosystems. Here's the problem. For every 1 degree that the temperature goes up on this planet because of CO2 emissions, the atmosphere is actually absorbing 7% more precipitation from the ground. The heat is forcing precipitation into the clouds quicker, so we're getting more concentrated precipitation in the clouds, more wild, extreme water events, more dramatic winter snows, more extreme spring flooding all over the world, more prolonged summer droughts and wildfires across continents, more Category 5 hurricanes. We had 4 hurricanes hit the United States this fall, destroying the Virgin Islands, the Caribbean, parts of Texas, Louisiana, and Florida. People killed, infrastructure destroyed. Our ecosystems cannot catch up to a runaway exponential curve in the water cycles of the earth, and our ecosystems are now collapsing all over the world in real time. And if you're a parent in this room today or a young millennial about to start a family, I want you to hear what I'm about to say. Our scientists now tell us we are in the 6th extinction event of life on Earth. Doesn't even make the newspapers or the media. We've had 5 mass extinction events in 450 million years on this planet, well before humans were ever here. And each time the extinction is quick and the recovery of new life 10 million years. We are now in the 6th extinction event, and tell us we could lose over half of all the species of life currently inhabiting this planet within the next 7 decades. Many of you, your children and grandchildren will be alive at that point. The last time we had a mass extinction event of this magnitude was 65 million years ago. As my wife says, we're not grasping the momentous nature of this period in human history. It's an extinction event. So what do? We need a new economic vision for the world. It needs to be compelling. We need a game plan to deploy that new vision. It needs to be quick. It has to move as expeditiously in the developing world as in the industrial world. We have to be off a carbon-based fossil fuel civilization everywhere in the world, everywhere, if we have any opportunity or chance to avoid the abyss. We will not reverse climate change. It will be here for thousands and thousands of years, affecting the way we live on this earth. But at least we may have an opportunity to regenerate life and let future generations have their moment here on this planet. So here in this conference today in Catalonia, we need to step back and ask this question in the business community. How do the great economic paradigm shifts in history occur? If we know how they occur, we're going to get a roadmap here with all the business people in this room, and we're going to get a compass on how Europe and the world can navigate a new journey into a post-carbon era quickly to save our planet, restore our economy, give hope to the millennials and their children for a better future. There have been at least 7 major economic paradigm shifts in history. They're very interesting. They share a common denominator. That is, at a moment of time, 3 defining technologies will emerge across a civilization and converge to create what we call in engineering a general purpose technology platform, an infrastructure that fundamentally transforms the way that society manages, powers, and moves economic, social activity, and governance. What are those 3 technology revolutions that come together? Number 1, new communication technologies to more efficiently manage our economic, social, and political activity. That's obvious. Number 2, new sources of energy to more efficiently power our economic, social, and governing activity. That's obvious, too. And number 3, new modes of mobility, transportation, and logistics to more efficiently move our economic, social, and political activity. When communication revolutions converge with new energy regimes and new modes of mobility to manage, power, and move society, it fundamentally transforms our spatial and temporal orientation, our economic models, our forms of governance, and even consciousness itself. Let me give you 2 concrete examples. First industrial revolution in the 19th century and the second industrial revolution in the 20th century. The British people brought us into the first industrial revolution in the 19th century with a convergence of communication, energy, and mobility, and a new built environment to manage, power, and move Great Britain. The Brits invented steam-powered printing, no more manual print presses. Steam-powered printing was a big leap forward in productivity. It enabled them, the Brits, to have very cheap, abundant print for books and periodicals and journals and for public education. In the last part of the 19th century, the Brits laid out a telegraph system across the British Isles. These 2 communication revolutions, steam-powered printing and the telegraph, converged in Britain with a new source of energy, cheap coal. And coal was harvested by a British invention, the steam engine. And then the Brits put the steam engine on rails, locomotives, national transportation. So this was a revolution that changed the way society managed, powered, and moved its activity. 20th century, the United States of America, a second industrial revolution, a new convergence of communication, energy, and mobility to manage, power, and move the U.S. Centralized electricity, and especially the telephone. I know we all understand the Internet's a big deal today, but try to imagine the telephone for the first time in history. People could communicate at the speed of light across the world at very cheap cost. Later in the U.S., we introduced radio and television. These communication media in the U.S. converged with a new source of energy, cheap Texas oil. And then Henry Ford put everybody on the road with cars, buses, and trucks. That second industrial revolution to manage, power, and move society, communication, energy, and transport, took us all through the 20th century. Took the whole world through the 20th century. It peaked in July 2008. If you remember that month, Brent crude oil hit a record of about $147 a barrel on world markets, a record price. And when that happened in July 2008, the entire global economy shut down. Complete silence. That was the great economic earthquake. The collapse of the financial market 60 days later, that was an aftershock. Why the earthquake at $147 for oil? This whole civilization relies on fossil fuels. Our fertilizers, our pesticides, most of our pharmaceutical products, our construction materials, our synthetic fiber, our power, our transport, our heat and light, all made out of and moved by fossil fuels. So when the price of oil goes over 80 a barrel, all the other prices go up. At around $110 a barrel, prices for everything become so high, purchasing power slows. We are now in a convulsive sunset over the next 40 years. Rising oil prices, and then other prices go up, and then shut down. Oil prices go down, we try to regrow our inventories. Oil prices go up, other prices go up, shut down. This is a convulsive sunset for the second industrial revolution. And what I would ask everyone in this room today, is there anyone here, let me see a show of hands, is there anyone in the room this afternoon that thinks we're in the sunrise of fossil fuels for energy? Anybody? It's clear that we are at a transitional moment in history. So I want to share an anecdote with you. When Angela Merkel became Chancellor of Germany, she asked me to come to Berlin in the very first couple of weeks of her new government to help her address the question of how to grow the German economy and create jobs during her administration. When I got to Berlin, the first question I asked the new Chancellor, I said, Madam Chancellor, how do you grow the German economy and create jobs when your businesses are plugged in to a second industrial revolution infrastructure of centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel nuclear power, internal combustion transport for road, rail, water, and air mobility, and that infrastructure to manage, power, and move German economy, German society, and governance, that infrastructure in its productivity more than a decade ago. This is the problem. The reason productivity is peaking all over the world today is because productivity is declining, and the reason it's declined is that the second industrial revolution infrastructure that we're all using has peaked in its performance. We can't get any more productivity out of it. It's clear that we need to now move into a new third industrial revolution. So on that first day with the Chancellor, we discussed a new convergence of communication, energy, and mobility to manage power and move Germany. And at the end of the day, the Chancellor said, Mr. Rifkin, we will have this third industrial revolution for Germany. This revolution is the digital revolution. The first industrial revolution was steam power generated. The second was analog electricity. The third is digital. All of us in this room today, I assume everyone in this room has a smartphone on them right now. We have 3.5 billion people connected in communication on the internet. It's been a revolution in less than 25 years since the World Wide Web. Now this digitalized communication internet that we all use is just now beginning to converge with a digitalized renewable energy internet, which is allowing millions of people to produce their own solar and wind electricity where they live, where they work, in their neighborhoods, use it off-grid, or send it back to a totally digitalized electricity grid that acts just like the communication internet, the energy internet. Now these two internets, the communication internet we're all using today, the digitalized electricity grid, the renewable energy internet, which is just emerging now in Spain and across the world, they're converting to the third internet, an automated, GPS, Galileo-directed, and soon driverless road, rail, water, and internet and air internet made out of electric and fuel cell transport. These three internets, the communication internet already here, the renewable energy internet now emerging, the automated mobility internet now emerging, to manage power and move Spain and Europe. These three internets ride on top of a platform called the Internet of Things. We are placing sensors in all of our devices, and this is happening across Catalonia, Spain, and the rest of the world. And those sensors are picking up data in real time. So we have sensors in the agricultural field, and they're monitoring crop growth, soil salinity, water. We have sensors in factories, sensors in smart homes, sensors in automobiles, sensors in warehouses, and they're picking up data moment to moment on economic activity. Where is that data going to? It's going to the emerging communication internet, the renewable energy internet, the automated and soon driverless mobility internet, so that all of us across society can better manage power and move our economic activity. By 2030, this global interconnectivity will be ubiquitous. This is essentially a global brain and nervous system. The satellites are the brain, and they're synchronizing all those sensors, and the sensors are coordinating data across the world, just like our brain and nervous system in our own bodies. It's an external brain and nervous system. And by 2030, we'll be connected. And what this means is anybody with a cheap mobile phone connected to this global brain and nervous system will be able to engage each other directly at very low cost and eliminate many of the giant vertically integrated global companies that kept the 1% from the 99%. This is a great potential expansion of economic democracy, of social entrepreneurialism. It favors small and medium-sized enterprises that come together in cooperatives laterally distributed. And this new third industrial revolution takes us into a new domain of globalization. The 20th century was top-down globalization, big centralized top-down telecommunication systems, fossil fuel, nuclear energy systems, and road, rail, water, and air transport. This third industrial revolution infrastructure, however, is not centralized. Think the internet. It's distributed. It's not top-down and proprietary. It's open and transparent and collaborative. The more people in the webs and the nets, the more everyone benefits. No one loses. And this new third industrial revolution platform is designed to laterally scale, not vertically integrate. So we're on the cusp of a mass potential democratization of economic life and a new form of globalization. We call it glocalization, local, global, glocalization. And even now in Catalonia and Spain and regions around the world, small, medium-sized businesses, cooperatives, nonprofits, and even big companies can engage each other in other regions around the world at very low cost and bypass all of those vertically integrated organizations that organize globalization in the 20th century. This is power to the people, literally and figuratively, globalization. So that's the upside. There's a downside here. While we're all excited about global interconnectivity, the ability of businesses to engage each other across entire regions of the world, both virtually and physically in real time, very cheap, there's a dark side. We call it the dark net. How do we assure network neutrality when everyone's connected? How do we ensure that everyone has equal access to this Internet of Things third industrial revolution? How do we ensure governments don't purloin this Internet of Things third industrial revolution for political purposes? For example, hacking the U.S. elections last year. How do we ensure that companies, some of them big Internet companies, don't monopolize this Internet of Things platform and to take our data without our permission and commodify us for their own profits? How do we protect privacy and data security? How do we protect against cyber terrorism that's continually a threat to the system? This is a dark net, and it's just as I should say, challenging as the bright net. So we're going to have to spend as much time and resources in dealing with the dark net and regulations to assure it does not prevail, so that we can actually get the benefits of the bright net. And here are the benefits. Let's say that you're a small and medium-sized enterprise in this room, or a large company, or a cooperative. You can go up now on this emerging Internet of Things platform, this smart third industrial revolution for smart Catalonia, smart Spain, smart Europe, and you can begin to get a transparent picture of all the economic data flowing through society if we keep it open, network neutral, and not closed. This evens the playing field, so any small and medium-sized company has the data that everyone else has. Then what you can do is strip out the data you care about on your value chain from all the other data coming through this Internet of Things nervous system. And you can mine that big data that you care about for your company, and you can use your analytics to mine the data, and then with the analytics and mining the data, you can create your own algorithms. You can create your own apps so that you can dramatically increase your aggregate efficiency and your productivity at every single step on your value chain as you manage, power, and move your business, goods, and services across the value chain. And by dramatically increasing your aggregate efficiency with data and analytics and your productivity, you dramatically plunge your ecological footprint as we're getting more out of each conversion and losing less of the Earth's resources. And this is important, this Internet of Things allows us to our marginal cost. Marginal cost of the cost at the fixed cost, the marginal cost of the cost of producing and distributing each additional product or service after the fixed costs have been covered. The marginal cost is plunging with a digital revolution. It's becoming so cheap to produce and distribute that it's forcing a shift in capitalism. When marginal costs get low because of digitalization, it means that there is less profit. So we have to shift the business model from capitalist markets to capitalist networks, from sellers and buyers to providers and users, from ownership to access of services. Because when those margins get low, the old market economy, you make a sale, you alienate the property to someone else, and it's over. Then you start again. You make a sale, you exchange the property, and it's over. So we are moving to networks where businesses across industries help manage the networks, and the networks are services between providers and users 24/7. So while the profits may be low, the volume of the traffic is continuous. There's no start-stop mechanism like you have in markets. These are capitalist networks. So it allows a constant flow of services between providers and users, and while the profit's low, the volume is high. It's like stock. You know, when you sell a stock, it's a small commission, but when you're flowing stock 24/7 in a flowed network, the amount of income is quite significant. Some of the marginal costs brought on by digitalization are getting so low, they're heading to near zero marginal cost, and that is giving rise to the sharing economy. And it's all over Spain and the rest of the world. This is the revolution. The sharing economy was birthed by capitalism, but it's a new economic system. And I'd have to say that even though it's young, it's unformed, this is the first new economic system to enter onto the world stage since capitalism and socialism in the 19th century. It's a remarkable historical event. We now have 3.5 billion people on the Internet. By the way, pretty soon everyone will be on the Internet of Things because China now has a smartphone for $25 with more computing power than sent our astronauts to the moon. So even if you're making $2 a day, you will have more computing power than sent our astronauts to the moon. So we now have 3.5 billion people connected already to this third industrial revolution. And at any given time of day, they are still sellers and buyers and owners and workers, and capitalism is not going to disappear. But we also now have a new category, prosumers, providers and users. Right now, as I speak to you this afternoon, we have millions of people at this moment who are producing and sharing their own music at near zero marginal cost. What does it cost to have a little digital recorder with studio quality, very cheap? And whether you send the music you produce to one person on the web or a billion people on the web, the cost is the same, near zero. You just need a service provider and power up your phone. We have young people, you remember that Korean performance artist a few years ago with a song and dance? He brought 1 billion people to his website in 2 months. It cost him almost nothing. We have millions of young people right now, as I speak to you, are producing and sharing their own YouTube videos, open source, no copyright, zero marginal cost. We have young people producing their own social media, their own news blog. Millions of people right now, this afternoon, contributing to Wikipedia, democratizing the knowledge of the world, near zero marginal cost. We have millions of young people this afternoon who are taking massive open online college courses, taught by the best professors from the best universities. They're getting college credits, near zero marginal cost. Whole industries have been disrupted with this communication revolution, the internet. The music industry, television, newspapers, book publishing, the knowledge industries have been disrupted. But thousands of new businesses have emerged, not just Google, Facebook, and Twitter, and Amazon. We have thousands of new businesses, some profit, some non-profit. They're mining the big data. They're using the analytics. They're creating the apps. We thought there'd be a firewall here. And while we could understand how the digitalization of communication would affect the world of virtual goods, creating a sharing economy, we didn't see that it would go over to the physical world. What I'm saying to you this afternoon, to all my friends here in Catalonia and Spain, the Internet of Things of the Third Industrial Revolution breaks through the firewall. This is a zero marginal cost society. That's the title of my new book, The Zero Marginal Cost Society. We now have literally millions of people, and some in Spain, around Europe, now in China, in America, who are producing their own solar and wind electricity right now at near zero marginal cost. After you pay the fixed cost, the marginal cost of generating the sun and the wind for electricity is near zero. The sun does not send you a bill. The wind does not send an invoice. You just have to keep the solar panel clean and the wind turbine clean. What's interesting is, let's go back to Germany. What's happened since my first conversation with the chancellor? We have a revolution going on in Germany. 35% of our electricity in Germany is generated by solar and wind at near zero marginal cost. We'll have 100% renewable energy, electricity, by 2040. And what's interesting is the fixed cost of producing that energy is plummeted. You know, back in 1979, if you wanted to generate 1 solar watt, the fixed cost would have been $78 to generate 1 solar watt, the fixed cost. You know what it is this afternoon? 53 cents. You know what it'll be in 18 months from now? 35 cents to generate the fixed cost. So solar and wind have been on an exponential plunging cost curve for fixed costs, just like computers. Computers used to cost millions of dollars, the first few computers. Now they're $25. The fixed cost plummeted. And what's interesting is we now have power and utility companies in Europe and now in the States and elsewhere who are buying long-term 20-year contracts for solar and wind electricity right now at 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Some at 3 cents a kilowatt hour, even 2 cents a kilowatt hour. And that means that fossil fuel and nuclear power, the curves show us that they're done. They're through. They cannot compete with 4 cents a kilowatt hour. So Citibank, the great banking company in New York, famous, issued a report about a year ago. I want everyone to hear this. They said the fossil fuel industry now has $100 trillion in stranded assets, fossil fuels, in their leases and their oil rigs and their exploration rights, because they're not going to be able to compete with solar and wind. It's already over. $100 trillion. This is the biggest bubble in history. And I tell my people, my friends in Spain, this carbon bubble is going to make the subprime mortgage crisis look like a small game. So all over the world, power and utility companies that I work with, the CEOs, are asking, what do we do? This is a disruption comparable to what happened to the music industry, newspapers, book publishing, with the digitalization of communication. Now it's the generation of solar and wind and the digitalization of electricity. Does this mean that, the first question is, who's producing all the new energy? There are 4 major power companies in Germany. We thought they were invincible 10 years ago, but what's happened to them now is what happened to the music industry and newspapers and book publishing. Millions of small players came together and created electricity cooperatives across Germany. Farmers, small businesses, local neighborhoods, they all got loans from the banks. The banks knew they'd pay back from the electricity they were generating. No one defaulted. 95% of all the new electricity of the 21st century, clean, post-carbon, solar and wind, generated by homes, small businesses, local factories, commercial districts. 4 power companies are producing less than 4% of the energy. They can't scale it because you have to collect the sun everywhere. You have to collect the wind everywhere. That means you collect it where you have buildings, homes, offices, factories, barns, sheds, warehouses. This is the revolution. So does this mean the end of the power and transmission companies? Not necessarily, but they have to change their business model. So I'll share a story with you. About a decade ago, E.ON, one of the big 4 power companies in Germany, asked if I would debate their chairman, Mr. Tyson. He's still there, heading the company. And I said yes. And I said to him, look, you're not leaving the second industrial revolution tomorrow morning. This is a 30-year transition. But the disruption is immediate and dramatic, just like it was in the music industry, newspapers, and book publishing. Disruption is dramatic and immediate, but it's a long-term shift. So over the next 30 years, I said, in the utility industry, you have to be in 2 portfolios. You have to ease out your legacy fossil fuel and nuclear industries because they're in stranded assets. And at the same time, you have to create a new business model for your solar, wind, and renewable energy industries for a 3rd industrial revolution, because that's where the new income will come from to help ease out the debt you've accumulated from stranded assets in fossil fuel and nuclear. So I said to Mr. Tyson, the chairman of E.ON, I said, in the new business model, 3rd industrial revolution, digital revolution, you make more and more money by generating none of your own electricity and by selling less and less and less electricity. He said, how do we do that? I said, you set up partnerships with thousands and thousands of businesses, and you help them manage the energy flowing through the energy internet across their value chain. You help them with their big data, their analytics. You help them with their apps. So those thousands of businesses can dramatically increase their productivity, reduce their ecological footprint because they're more efficient using less of the Earth's energy, and dramatically plunge their marginal cost. In return, those thousands of businesses will reward the power and utility company for helping them increase their productivity and reduce their marginal cost. Those thousands of businesses will reward the power and utility companies by sharing some of those productivity gains. It's called performance contracts. 5 years ago, the chairman Tyson said no. Last year, he said yes to the business model that I put forth. He put his fossil fuel and nuclear power companies on the market, but now they're stranded. Nobody's buying. And they're moving to energy services. RWE, one of the other 2 of the big 4 power companies in Germany, has now moved to take their legacy businesses, fossil fuel, nuclear, and tire them out over a period of time, and they're concentrating on energy services. So is ENGIE, formerly GDF Suez, and now ERDF, the great nuclear company in France. They've joined my group, where my global consulting group is doing the entire paradigm shift in northern industrial France. And EDF, they're with us, laying out the energy internet. So they're not leaving nuclear tomorrow morning, but you got to be in 2 business models. Same in Spain. You got to start moving to this new business model while you retire out the old. And it's not just Europe, it's also China. When President Xi and Premier Li came into office, Premier Li announced that he had read my book, The 3rd Industrial Revolution. I had never met him. I was quite surprised. And he instructed the central government of China to move on the narrative that I am laying out to you this afternoon, and to begin developing a digital 3rd Industrial Revolution for China. And boy, China moves quick. I've been doing formal visits with the leadership there. 2 weeks after my first visit, The Chinese government announced $82 billion in the new 5-year plan, which began this last year, to completely digitalize the electricity grid of the national grid of China. So that millions of Chinese people in their local businesses, their commercial districts, their homes, their neighborhoods can produce their own solar and wind electricity. And the solar and wind technology comes from their own companies because they're the largest producer of solar and wind technology. And what they don't use, they can share back on a nationwide energy internet. Good business. Watch Europe, watch China. And I should say that Spain, by the way, was head-on-head with Germany. And then you had a big change in Spain, and the new government went back to the old 20th century nuclear power, and you lost the initiative you had. Solar and wind were putting Spain on the map as one of the key movers. Hopefully that will turn around very quickly, because Spain has a tremendous opportunity here, along with Germany and China and other countries, to be a lead in this great transition. The coming together of the communication internet with the renewable energy internet makes possible the automated mobility internet. Now, let me be clear. We built the entire second industrial revolution on making cars and selling cars. The problem is, and there are probably millennials in this room this afternoon under the age of 38, you millennials don't want to own cars. That's grandma and grandpa. 2 cars sitting in the driveway, waxing them once a month, or sitting at the office for 8 hours a day idle. The millennials in this audience do not want to own vehicles in markets. They want car-sharing services in car-sharing networks. They want access to the transportation, not ownership of the vehicle. And starting with the millennials, children and grandchildren, they're not going to own vehicles again. For every car shared with these digital car-sharing services, we're eliminating 15 cars from production. So we're still going to be selling lots of vehicles, but the big auto companies see the handwriting on the wall. They're still going to sell millions of vehicles in the short run, but they're moving into the mobility internet. I've worked with 2 of the big companies over the last year, Daimler and Ford. They're still going to sell millions of vehicles, but over 30 or 40 years, they're going to have to move toward provider user networks, where they provide autonomous vehicles as the providers. We users use those vehicles, very low fixed cost, very low marginal cost. Those vehicles are electric, they're fuel cell, they're made of 3D printed material, which is recycled material. They will be autonomous within 5 years, very low cost. All of these 3 internets, the communication internet, the digital renewable energy internet, and the digital mobility internet, as I said, they ride on top of the Internet of Things platform. What is the platform? It's the buildings. It's every building in Catalonia, every building in Spain, every building in the world are the nodes. The buildings are the nodes. The buildings, if you will, are the big data, the distributed big data centers. The buildings are the renewable energy sites to generate micro power. The buildings and around the buildings have the electric charging stations for transportation. So we have to imagine that every building in Spain and Europe and around the world will be retrofitted, because you can't actually turn them into digital nodes for the Internet of Things unless they're efficient. We have to heavy retrofit every home, office, factory so they don't leak, so they're efficient energy-wise. Then we transform them into distributed data centers. So it is in with Google, Facebook, and Twitter. The data should be distributed so every region and community can have public platforms that are controlled by the community, so they determine how that data is used. And the buildings will become, as I say, micro power generation sites for renewable energies, and then charging stations for your electric vehicles. This is essentially a complete infrastructure revolution that's going to transform life. And what's interesting is this is the only way that I know of, and we work with global companies and scientific institutes all over the world. This is the only way we know to quickly get us off of an old economic system whose productivity has dramatically declined, and a system that's bringing us into real-time climate change. If we can begin to move toward this dual system, part capital, part sharing economy, It means that we are dramatically increasing our productivity with very efficient mobile technology. We're increasing our aggregate efficiency. We're reducing our ecological footprint. Then if what we do produce is share, why don't we share the cars, share the homes, share the children's toys? If we can then share what we produce, then nothing goes to the landfill. We redistribute in a circular economy over and over again. We drop our ecological footprint. And then if we can go to the renewable energy internet, everyone in the world should be able to produce their own green electricity in 25 years from now. We're now placing photovoltaics in glass, in paint. It'll be on facades. Within 25 years from now, it'll be as inexpensive as mobile phones. In any little village in the world, you'll be able, through your buildings and your infrastructure, to put together your own solar and wind microgeneration and send it back to continental internet. Because the fixed prices are plummeting, marginal costs are near zero. And finally, if we go to automated transport and mobility, the transport companies aren't going to disappear, but they're going to go to mobility internet. Daimler is now developing a mobility internet for trucking. Ford is now developing a mobility internet for provider user services for autonomous vehicles. If we move to this over a period of 40 years, we'll probably eliminate 80% of the vehicles in the world with car sharing and autonomous vehicles. The other 20% of vehicles that remain will be electric, fuel cell, recycled with 3D printed material, driverless. So when I meet with heads of state, I ask them, do you have another plan? Do you have another plan that can move us to address climate change quickly, take us off a carbon civilization, create new business models, increase productivity, and put people back to work to lay out culture? And when I ask that question, do you have another plan, I always get silence. Silence. Because the only other plan is to stay in a dying second industrial revolution where the business opportunities have peaked because the productivity is stalled. And we have a whole generation of young millennials who are not finding proper work. This third industrial revolution in Spain will involve virtually every industry to lay out the infrastructure. You'll need consumer electronics and ICT. You'll need power and transmission companies and telecom. You'll need transport and logistics companies. You will need construction and real estate companies for the infrastructure. You'll need the agricultural and life science industries. You'll need the tourist industries, and I know many of them are in the room today, to lay out the infrastructure. Robots aren't going to retrofit all your buildings, and AI are not going to put in your insulation and your glass and your doors. Robots and AI aren't going to lay out the 5G underground cable and dig those cable links for the broadband we need for the Internet of Things. Human beings are going to do that. AI and robots aren't going to install solar panels and wind turbines. You need human beings for all of this. Charging stations, we have to put in thousands of them across Spain. That's got to be human beings. So there's an opportunity over the next 2 generations for semi-skilled, skilled, and professional work to totally transform the infrastructure, our communication infrastructure, our energy infrastructure, our mobility infrastructure, our built environment of homes, offices, factories, and commercial real estate. And the moment we start on this infrastructure revolution in each region, we create new business opportunities and new jobs for everybody in this room. Everybody in this room. So the only alternative to that is to stay paralyzed or to move back to an old second industrial revolution way of life that we know has now taken us to an economic stalemate and potentially environmental abyss. In Europe, we are just now, it's not just talk, it's walk, theory to practice. In February of this year, I joined Meryl Sefcovic, the Vice President of the European Commission, who's in charge of the Energy Union for Europe and Smart Europe. And we also joined with the President of the Committee of the Regions of Europe at the European level, Markku Markkula, and we announced Smart Europe. We have a 641 billion euro fund, the Juncker Fund, called Jean-Claude Juncker's fund, 641 billion euros. Much of that can go to lay out this infrastructure to transform every region in Spain to very high level communication internet, 5G, renewable energy internet, mobility internet, information, the building stock to the IoT. The money's there. All we need is the will in each region to seek monies not only from Europe, but also the private equity to move this forward. Unless you think it's impossible, we have 3 regions that have shown you can do it. My global group has worked over the last 5 years. We are in 3 regions. Northern industrial France, the old mining region of France, the old steel and auto region, the Rust Belt of France. We're in our 5th year there. We've created 900 projects. We're moving forward with jobs in areas that were unemployed for years. We just finished a joint project with the 23 cities from Rotterdam to The Hague, and they're now deploying projects that will be worth several billion in year 2 of their deployment. Our global team just finished Luxembourg, the nation state, the financial capital of Europe. In each case, it's the regions that did this. They brought hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stakeholders and several thousand other people. And over 10 months, we worked with them, and our global experts worked with them, and they created and customized their own plans to transform their regions. So it became theirs. They were empowered. And once you're empowered in an entire region, and the government asked everybody to come together across industry, the universities, the neighborhoods, and create their own plans, it moves quickly. This is really power to the people. This is really lateral distributed democracy at work. If it can happen in the 3 regions I just mentioned, northern France, Rotterdam to The Hague, 23 cities, and Luxembourg, this can happen in every single province and region of Spain tomorrow morning, with or without the federal government. The money is there. The game plan architecture for this infrastructure conversion is there. The only thing is missing is the willpower to think new and to invite the native digital generation to join with the older generation to make this happen. I am guardedly hopeful Spain can do it. I've watched what can happen in the regions of Spain over the years. You have world-class expertise in every one of these industries. There is no reason why Spain, along with Germany and France, these 3 countries should be leading this digital third industrial revolution. And the legacy is, hopefully we address climate change. Hopefully we start to regenerate the planet. We create opportunities for our children with new digital opportunities. And we make possible the opportunity of all those human beings not yet here to have their moment on this earth. And all our fellow creatures who are not yet here to have their moment on this earth. We owe it to this precious gift we've been given in the universe, this thing called life on earth. And here in Spain, the business community will lead us and be first movers. Thank you. Now I think we will take questions.
Thank you, Jeremy. I have a question for you. I know you talk a lot about the empathic civilization, the empathic society. What is it for you?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I wrote a book. There are 3 books in this series. The first one was The Empathic Civilization. The second one was The Third Industrial Revolution. And the third one, the current one, is The Zero Marginal Cost Society. And the reason I wrote The Empathic Civilization first is it became clear to me, and I'm an old man, I'm 72, it became clear to me after 40 or 50 years in this, almost, I guess 50, that we have misunderstood the basic of what a human being is over history. And much of it, we came to believe in the modern age, the age of the Enlightenment, we came to have a very strange idea of the human personality. And that is that human beings are born to be autonomous and predatory and competitive in a zero-sum game world. If that's the way human beings are, we would have died out as a species a long time ago. What we're now learning in the cutting-edge fields of cognitive science and biology and the other sciences is that human beings are the most social creature. We have the biggest neocortex, and we are soft-wired not for predation, but soft-wired for empathy. That the competitive, predatory, violent urges are secondary urges when the basic urge is So babies are actually born in the neural circuitries to experience in their actual neural circuitry the pain, the pleasure of another person as if it were coming from my own body. It's not up here. So if you see somebody and they're in trouble, and maybe they're bleeding or something, you will feel like you're bleeding. If you see a spider going up someone's arm, you'll feel it's going up your arm. This is built into our neural circuitry. So in the empathic civilization, I went back in history. And what I found is that empathy has evolved over history. Forager hunter societies, they were only empathic within their tribal blood tie. 100 people in a unit, that was their family, that was humanity. Anyone in the next tribe, they didn't feel empathy to. They were the other. You go to the great hydraulic civilizations, and we went from tribal empathy to religious empathy. People that were in these giant religions, Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, began to think of fellow religious cohorts as their fictional family. And all the way up in the modern age, when we created a nation state, we began to identify as citizens of our country, and we began to see our fellow citizens as our fictional family, and began to empathize them as our brothers and sisters. And so we've had dark periods in between where all of this collapses, very dark periods. But nonetheless, there's a very hopeful historical sojourn where empathy has evolved in wider domains based on the shifts in our communication, energy, and mobility that allowed us to organize more people across larger time and space domains. Right now, I'm hopeful because our kids, they're in a global world now. They're Skyping in global classrooms. There's 1.5 billion kids on Facebook. It's the largest fictional family. Kids are gaming with each other in digital games all over the world. And they're moving to biosphere consciousness. They're beginning to see the planet, the biosphere, as our indivisible home. They're not giving up their national identities or their cultural identities or their religious identities or their blood ties, but they're beginning to see that they're nested in a larger entity called the planet we live in, and they're beginning to realize that the well-being of each of us depends on the well-being of everybody else, that whatever we do individually affects the ecological footprint of the rest of the world, our fellow creatures in the planet. This is biosphere consciousness. So I'm guardedly hopeful because I think we are on a cusp of empathizing more broadly, beginning to see our human family and all of our diversity as a single family, and beginning to see our fellow creatures as part of that evolutionary family. So this makes me guardedly hopeful. Not optimistic, but just guardedly hopeful.
Thank you. And another question. This morning, we have a lot of students here with us. And you said we need to move the society to the change. So how can we help our students? How can we help young people to make this happen? Because you said you are optimistic. What can we do to be so optimistic as you and to help them to move this change?
We have to change the school system. Our educational systems are so outdated, so outmoded. They are not preparing a digital generation for living in a biosphere world. Our public school systems were developed in the 19th century, and they were designed to prepare young people for factory work. So, you go to the schoolhouse when you're 5 years old, and on the top, they have Francis Bacon, when knowledge is power. You begin to think, oh, that's why I'm here, to have power. Then when you're in the classroom, you have the teacher in the front and the children looking straight at her, and she gives you the subject, and you recite back the knowledge. You ask how, but not why. If you share knowledge with other students, it's called cheating. And what's happened is every 60 minutes, the bell rings, and you go to the next part of the assembly line for the next course, which is unrelated to the course you just had. This is not the way life needs to be prepared for the digital generation. They have to learn to think systemically, understand that we are part of one connected world, that everything we do affects everyone else. So let me tell you what we're doing in France. Northern industrial France, where we're working with the entire industrial region, the universities and high schools have come together, and I want all the students to hear this. It's very interesting. And Catholic University of Lille, France, along with the other universities, they have changed the university. So at Catholic University, they academic departments. They haven't eliminated them totally, but the professors now have to teach across their disciplines. So if you're learning, for example, biology, you may also have a philosopher there or somebody that's involved in economics. So you get different perspectives and understand how they connect with each other so they're not isolated. Then the students have to learn in teams, not as individuals competing with each other. So in the teams, the students are facilitated by the teacher, but they have to teach each other. If you share knowledge in the teams, it's not cheating. It's considered the best approach to knowledge because knowledge is a social experience. It's the shared experience of our existence. It's not knowledge as power for each individual. It's knowledge as a way to extend our empathy and understand our common existence. And then it's not enough just to be in teams. Then whatever you learn, you have to go out to neighborhoods where the schools are and work with your fellow citizens to apply that knowledge in the community. So what we're creating with this kind of distributed education is not top-down centralized power, but distributed power, collaborative power, transparent knowledge. And we prepare a young generation with the kind of skills they need to navigate a infrastructure that's based on distributed, collaborative, open, transparent, and laterally, if you will, configured ways of organizing life. It's a much more humane way to educate. And I think if these little shoots of education that are starting in France and now in the Netherlands and Luxembourg, it should start in Spain as well. I'm sure there are some experiments already starting.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, for your time. We are running out of time right now, so any question for them? For him, sorry. So thank you very much in advance, please.
Very nice. Good luck with everything. Very nice to be with you.
It has been a real pleasure, Jeremy. See you soon.